Hey there, people. It's Ricky the Tie-Dye Bee Guy here, and I'm out here in my apiary. You can see that I'm feeding my bees. This time of year I'm feeding 2-to-1 syrup, but not quite 2-to-1. I used to feed 2-to-1 syrup, but I had a problem with that a long time ago, and I discovered the answer. If you've had trouble getting your bees to take 2-to-1 syrup, stick with me. We're going to go through a little exercise, and I'm going to show you why they're not taking your 2-to-1 syrup and how you can fix that. If you're like me, when I first started beekeeping, you may be scratching your head about why your bees don't seem to like thick syrup. And I don't blame you, it's frustrating. Well, there may be a reason for that, and I'm about to show you just what that is. You might wonder why people encourage using thick syrup in the fall in the first place. Well, for me, there are two reasons. First of all, thin syrup encourages brood rearing, and in the fall, I want my queens to slow down brood rearing and start storing lots of food for the winter. The second reason is because now that the temperatures are getting colder and the humidity is getting higher, it's much harder for the bees to evaporate a lot of water out of the nectar or syrup that they're putting away. So the thicker the syrup, the better for those two reasons. Now, back to the question of why your bees aren't taking the syrup in the first place. You may think your bees aren't taking the syrup just because the temperature is too low. Well, this may be the case, but not the way you think. So just why is it? It's simply because the sucrose in your 2-to-1 syrup crystallizes out of solution below 70 degrees Fahrenheit and plugs the feeder holes. Now, this doesn't happen every time because it depends on the temperature and the types of feeders you're using and the size of the holes in your feeder. But if your temperatures are down in the 50s or 60s, it's going to get even worse than that. There's nothing wrong with feeding at these low temperatures. We just need to make sure that our syrup is thin enough not to crystallize out of solution and plug our holes. Why does this happen? It's because 2-to-1 syrup is saturated at or below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So what does saturated mean? Saturated means that no more of the solute, which is sucrose, will dissolve if it is added to the solution. And it turns out that the warmer the solution gets, the more sucrose will dissolve, allowing us to achieve a higher concentration. So how do we fix our problem with crystallization? Well, there are two ways. First, we could raise the temperature, which would raise the solubility of the sucrose of the syrup. Or we could lower the concentration of the sucrose, which lowers the temperature at which the sucrose precipitates out of solution. However, we're kind of stuck because since we have no control over the temperature, our only option is to lower the concentration. So how much do we need to reduce the concentration? I think you're going to be really surprised at the number, so keep following along. Well, it depends on how cold it's going to get. It might be a little extreme, but for the purposes of this exercise, let's assume it's going to get down to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll see why that ends up being such a convenient choice mathematically. So I just want to take a quick second to ask that if you find this content helpful, I would really appreciate if you would like my video and subscribe to my channel. I'm just getting started, and every little bit helps me grow my channel, so feel free to poke around and see what else is there that might be of interest. So just how do we go about deciding what our concentration should be to avoid crystallization? Yeah, well, sorry, sometimes there's just no way around it. There's a little bit of like maybe 8th grade math, but it's really easy. So I have already done it for you, so it's pretty painless. So just try to follow along. So first, we need to properly express the value of concentration. There are two common ways of doing that. First, we can express it as a ratio, such as 2-to-1 or 1-to-1, like you hear all the time. For example, parts sugar to parts water by weight. But sometimes we need to express it in terms of percent concentration, which is as percentage of the weight of sugar compared to the weight of the solution. We do this by simple division, just like this. Just divide the weight of the sugar by the weight of the solution. So we need to convert our ratio to a percent. To do so, just divide the sugar weight by the weight of the finished solution and multiply by 100. For example, for a 2-to-1 syrup, just follow the simple steps described. When we do this, we find that for any given sample of 2-to-1 syrup, 66.7% of that sample would be sugar. So now that we understand what percent concentration means, we can calculate the maximum percent concentration allowable at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It turns out there's a handy formula for that thanks to a woman named Clara Millicent Taylor back in 1913. In this formula, the C stands for concentration of our syrup and the T stands for temperature. Now, we need the temperature to be in Celsius for it to work in this formula. But for the freezing point of water, we all know that it's 0 degrees Celsius. If we're doing this for any other temperature, we would have to manually convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. Now, if we just substitute 0 for all of the T's in the formula shown, we end up with this. Since the zeros actually eliminate the second and third terms in our equation, we end up with this. So we need a concentration of 63.6% or lower in order not to crystallize at 32 degrees. Now remember that the concentration of 2-to-1 syrup is higher at 66.7%, so we need to use significantly less sugar to make our non-crystallizing syrup. So what's the new sugar to water ratio for the 63.6% syrup? Well, there is a rigorous mathematical way to do this, but it's quite a bit more complicated than I want to go into here because I don't want to bore anyone. But I actually worked this out by trial and error. And remember from our formula from before for calculating concentration from ratio? Well, if we put a ratio of 7 to 4 in that formula, we end up with a concentration of 63.64%, which is just barely above our desired 63.6% concentration. So you want to know another really cool coincidence with the 7 to 4 ratio? If you dissolve 7 pounds of sugar in 4 pounds of water, which is just under a half a gallon, you get almost exactly 1 gallon of syrup. It's actually 1.008 gallons to be exact. So now you can go out and use this new 7 to 4 ratio and be absolutely sure that your sugar isn't crystallizing and clogging up your feeders. Thank you for watching, and please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Feel free to poke around my channel and see what other cool stuff there is to watch. I think that you'll find some of it useful. So that's it for me, Ricky the Tie-Dye Bee Guy. Have fun, people.